This is an interesting one, folks. I haven't done an interview in quite some time, and I've got a cool one lined up. It's not your typical fighter, but it's a guy who is around Noche UFC this past weekend. He is the Proto Inventor and CEO, David Nussbaum. David, thanks for joining me today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. This is great. I am not an MMA fighter, although I did get picked on in high school quite a bit, so I learned how to fight back.
There you go. Now, I want to talk about Noche UFC specifically right off the hop, and then we'll get back into sort of your origin story of how this all came about. But this past weekend, man, like this is the first of its kind in the sphere. UFC does their thing. Tell me about how the whole process came about. Like, how did Dana White even get into contact with you to get Proto involved in this?
I run my hologram company out of a pretty sweet production building in Van Nuys, California. In the production building, there are podcasts, there are some other shows that are being produced there. My good friend and investor and advisor Howie Mandel was running a podcast, and Dana White was a guest on his podcast. It was a very famous podcast where Dana White actually walked right off his podcast. I don't know if you've seen that one, but he
Yeah,
sits
yeah.
down with Howie. I mean, it's iconic and it's infamous at this point. So Dana walks right over to me, and without even and in my showroom, if you'd have to visualize it, there's like 10 hologram displays all projecting different visuals, and it's like walking into like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory but for holograms instead of chocolate. And so Dana White walks right over to me and says, I know what I would do with this technology. I know 100 ways to use this technology, and I don't even really know what the hell it is I'm looking at. Explain this to me. So I took him through a quick demonstration. I showed him what we did, and he said, this is something that we ought to work on together. So he gave me his number, which was amazing because he's a very famous guy, and you would think that he would want a little bit more privacy, but he said this is a technology that I really want to dig into. So we texted back and forth a little bit. He put me in contact with his folks over at the UFC. And last night or 2 nights ago, Saturday at UFC 306 at the Sphere, holograms of Dana White, multilingual Dana White, and all of the athletes that were on the card, even the main cards, all projected themselves in full volumetric, lifelike, holographic display, and it was a hit. I'm excited.
So, I guess before we move forward, how am I sure that I'm actually speaking with you and not an AI version of you?
Oh, well, that is true. You'll never know. Well, actually, my AI version is more handsome and smarter than me. So this is me.
Were you a UFC fan going into this?
Oh, sure. How can you not be? First of all, I'm old school UFC in the sense that I've been following it since you'd have a boxer fight a wrestler, and then you'd have like a Gracie fight, a street fighter. And so, like, I loved old, like pre Dana, like pre the way the UFC is turned into. I've been in love with the Ultimate Fighting Championship for a very, very long time. But The Ultimate Fighter is on Spike TV is one of the greatest reality shows of all time. And Dana White is brilliant because he let us get to know the athletes. We became interested in them as individuals, and then we would follow them through their careers, and then we would root for them, almost like
Yeah.
you would root for teams, like team sports. And so it was really great. So I've been a fan for years.
So you spoke about, the infamous Howie Mandel podcast. For those that don't know, so how long ago was that? And sort of prep time leading into Noche UFC, how long did that go about?
I'd say that was probably about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit longer. So 6 months ago, yeah, Dana White sits in on Howie's podcast. Howie, I thought, was very complimentary. Dana sat down. Howie said, "Dana, you're a genius. You're a visionary." And he listed off like 10 accomplishments. And Dana said, I don't even know why I do podcasts. I can't do this right now." He gets up and he walks out. And it's one of the greatest podcasts that never happened. Hopefully Dana comes back and does Howie's podcast for real. And then, but Dana and I stayed in touch. The technology gave Dana saw he plays like 4D chess. He knew what this technology was going to be used for without even knowing what it did, especially with Noche coming up months later, and how, because this was his love letter to Mexico, we were able to take his hologram, scan him, turn him into an AI, and then he was able to speak perfect Spanish. And so he was able to talk to the fans and to everybody that entered the sphere in perfect Spanish.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen, if you guys
remarkable.
haven't seen that, it's on the Proto Instagram page. I'll leave a link for that in the description box below, because yeah, that's super cool. And so leading up, when he talked to you and he said he knew you guys were going to do how he could use it, you guys texted back and forth. Was Noche UFC the plan right from the get-go for Dana? Like, he knew the sphere was where this was going to be, or he just had an idea, we got to do this somehow?
I would like to think that that was tucked away in his brain. He didn't say that at the time. I think he was just very impressed with the technology. I can't speak for Dana. I'm just very, very glad and honored that we were such a small part of such a big event. Wow, it was just so great. And it's just, since it's just the two of us talking and nobody's listening, I got to actually, I snuck in. We were sitting right outside. We were just outside of section 102, 103. And that was right where the Proto was. And it was a big, beautiful display. And wow, they really went overboard on showcasing us. But you know what? When nobody was looking, I ducked my head inside of the sphere. Holy cow.
Was it your first
Wow.
time there?
What an amazing, my first time there. I wanted to go see the Grateful Dead. I wanted to see U2. I wanted to see all the, but I didn't go. I saw Noche. Holy cow. I feel bad for every single artist or event that tries to put on a show there from this point moving forward, because they went bananas on that place. It was remarkable. I don't know if you've seen any of the video on the UFC or on the Sphere like Instagrams, but it was, to see this in person, I felt like I was on another planet.
That's what I was going to say, because I actually did a video yesterday, like talking about the Sphere, showing some of the UFC Instagram page and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that probably doesn't give it justice to being there in person. I guarantee you,
Right.
like, everybody in person, that was next level.
Wow. It was so, I was looking around, like I felt like a kid again.
Oh, yeah.
It was emotional. Like what Dana and the team over at UFC did, he created such a storyline that I'm gonna just keep replaying over and over again. I wish I took more pictures and video of inside the Sphere, because it was a once in a lifetime moment. They really outdid themselves.
And now Proto was a part of it. So, I mean, how cool is that for you?
Oh, it's the greatest. We've done a lot of things at Proto. Nothing comes close to just the size and the scope. We've done every major sport draft. We beamed, the first round draft picks in football and basketball and hockey, and we've beamed their draft picks while being drafted. Draft goes to so and so. We'll beam that person to the stadium or to the arena where their hometown fans get to see them for the first time. Yeah, it was wild. So we've done stuff like that. We've done a lot of stuff with sports, but nothing comes quite as. It just doesn't. It doesn't.
That's what I was
going
to ask. I know you, like, I've seen that you've done, NFL, you've done all the major sports. Obviously, you're on Big Brother this season as well, which is super cool. I'm a giant Big Brother fan. I want to get into that in a few minutes as well.
Good.
But this one, like, in terms of the fighters, anybody stand out in terms of, like, they were sort of in awe seeing themselves, or it was just a cool experience with a certain fighter?
I can't put. I don't even want to even attempt to try to think what the fighters thought, what the athletes thought of seeing themselves larger than life. By the way, as they were doing kind of the walk-ins, so we had the holograms of them outside. So if they were 6'1", they appeared 6'1" inside of our like holographic display just outside of the main sphere area in the atrium. But inside the sphere, inside the dome, they stood 300 feet tall. It was crazy. I felt like I was in a like a psychedelic, dream or something. It was absolutely crazy. And yeah, it's something I'll never forget.
All right, last thing about UFC before I go back to, beginnings for you. Is this a one and done for you guys with the UFC, or do you guys have other things in store?
Oh, I hope not. I'd love to do everything with the UFC. I think Dana White and his team are some of the most remarkable people that we've ever gotten a chance to work with. Oftentimes we'll do an activation or an event, or we'll do a setup or some kind of something. We'll do something with a customer and our display will be featured, and I'm very appreciative and it looks great. But what they did with all of the set design around it, they absolutely went above and beyond, and they put us in the best position possible. Sports Center, ESPN, all the different MMA websites and television shows all featured us across their TikToks and their social media. My inbox is filled with interested potential customers. So Dana White, if you're listening to this or if you're watching this, I am super grateful. Please have us back.
That's amazing. So let's go back then. You as a young kid obviously must have been super interested in computers and all that other kind of jazz and whatnot. How did this all come about with AI? Like, talk about the beginnings of Proto and how you got involved and started this whole company.
I was interested in radio. I wasn't a computer guy. In fact,
Okay.
Computers even really weren't kind of a thing when I was a kid. So I'm aging myself here. So I used to listen to but before the podcasts, children, there was something called radio, and you would go into the car and you'd turn on the radio, and we would have one in the house as well. I was a big fan of baseball when I was growing up, and hockey, and I grew up in New Jersey, and I was a big Mets fan. So I would watch the games on television. My buddies and I, we'd all watch the games on TV, and we didn't know that this was a job, but we had so much fun turning the volume down and then just doing the play-by-play and the color. And we would call the games, and we were like 7 and 8 years old. And little did I know that that was going to be something that was going to turn into what I wanted to do for my career. And so I moved to Los Angeles. I started working for CBS Radio and a bunch of other large and even some independent radio stations. And over the years, I developed a bit of a broadcasting career. Broadcasting led to podcasting, where I had one of the first 1,000 podcasts on the Apple platform. I met my wife on my podcast. My whole life was because of radio and my podcast. On my podcast, though, check this out. One of the episodes was a guy named Johnny Fratto. And Johnny Fratto, may he rest in peace, introduced me to the guy who owned the patents that were later used to famously put Tupac on stage at Coachella in 2012. So I started a company with an eccentric billionaire, and our business, so this was in 2012, we started a company where we would bring dead musicians back to posthumously perform all over the world. And so we used those very famous Tupac patents. Those patents were very valuable, and we just started bringing back everybody we could. However, to make a long story short, I took my knowledge and know-how and experience with creating holograms, but my love of broadcasting would never escape me. So I thought, instead of bringing back the dead, what if I could use holograms to connect the living? So instead of talking into a microphone and hearing your voice come out of a speaker, or instead of looking into a TV camera and seeing your face on a screen, I thought, what if I could broadcast you? Like, what if I could beam you places? So it's like your full body. It's like you're there. And so that's what I did. So in 2018, I started Proto in my living room, and thank God it worked. because I didn't have a backup plan. And now, for the last 5 years, I've been beaming people places all over the world. It's fantastic.
So obviously the has the the AI stuff in terms of technology changed from that 2018 to now completely, or basically the same
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
stuff?
No, so when I started Proto, there was AI wasn't involved in this. The idea was to beam people places.
Okay.
And it was like a communication portal. Like I
Yeah.
just wanted to send you wherever you needed to go. If you can't be there, you can beam there. That was our thing. In fact, just this morning, William Shatner, otherwise known as Captain Kirk, about a year ago, he called me up and he says, I made beaming people places famous.
Yeah.
How can we not be working together? So I beamed William Shatner, Bill Shatner, from Los Angeles to Orlando so he can actually speak on stage at a conference and convention 3,000 miles away. So I beam people places. However, I guess about a year ago, we really started diving deep into the world of AI, because when you can't beam in, your AI avatar should be able to take over and complete the mission, complete the communication, or whatever the messaging is. So now I can scan you. By the way, I can scan you. I have one of me. I have one of Bill Shatner. I have one of Howie Mandel. We can scan you and then hook you up to any LLM, any open or closed data set of AI. And so now you can talk to whoever, wherever, whenever, in any language. That's how we got
Wow.
Dana White speaking Spanish. And it's absolutely crazy. And that's what we're doing on Big Brother. You brought up Big Brother. We're
Yeah.
using it's an all AI season on Big Brother. And so we scanned all of the house guests and Julie Chen, the host, and they're all taking over each other's bodies and they're all puppeteering each other. I mean, it's an AI masterpiece what they're putting on over on Big Brother.
Yeah, it's wild. And I was completely shocked when that actually took over right off the first episode. They had Ainsley and, it turns into AI. I was like, how is this even going to work? And it's blown my mind almost every episode. You must be sort of shocked at how far this has come.
Oh, yes. I am shocked because look, I know it was a good idea, but I've had
Oh
lots of
yeah,
good
of course.
ideas, and I know lots of people who have had really great ideas, but this doesn't happen by myself. I have a team of people that, if not for them, this company doesn't exist. I just got very lucky by being surrounded by like-minded people who liked my idea enough to say, "Okay, I'm in this with you. Let's do this." And even in the early days when I had no money to pay them, they'd say, "You know what? We'll worry about that later. You've got a good idea, and I'd like to help." So now that's what's happening. They're making this happen. We're all doing it together. It's a big team.
So was that the tagline? If you can't be there, I'm gonna beam you there, kind of thing.
That was my first. I When you start a company that nobody's ever heard of before, not just a company, but to create a market, people thought I was a crazy person. I'm gonna beam people places, and
Yeah.
it's like holoportation booths. And so I kind of had to do a bit of a Dana White. Dana is a bit of an inspiration for me. He's the ultimate marketing guy. And so I took a page out of Dana White's playbook and I started using marketing to get people to understand what this technology is. It's a hologram, and I'm using certain buzzwords that I think people are going to relate to. I'm going to beam people, beam me up Proto. And I started using things like that. But taglines alone, slogans and marketing alone, will never build a company. You actually have to, put up. And we have a fantastic company that does everything that I say, which is just absolutely wild stuff.
Well, and like you said, I mean, you've done it all. You've done all the sports teams. You've done Big Brother, and now you've done the UFC. And congratulations to you, man, because it was something super special to see, and I wish I could have been there in person to see it live and in the flesh. Hopefully I will one day. Is there anybody or anything that you would love to use Proton on?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
A name that
I've got
is
a list. Totally. Yes. So by the way, we just beamed Mr. Beast. This is his most recent video. So in the taping that we're doing right now,
yeah.
as we're taping this, the most recent video of Mr. Beast features Proto. We beamed Jimmy. We beamed Jimmy, otherwise better known as Mr. Beast, beamed him from 1,000 feet below Earth in a subterranean cave in a remote remote cave in New Zealand. We beamed him up and out to the top of a bridge in the wilderness of North Carolina, about almost 9,000 miles away. And in real time, he was able to communicate and connect with and even check in on another video that was happening in another part of the world. And so that was pretty great. That was exciting. This is the most visible human on Earth with probably 300 or 400 million subscribers to his YouTube channel alone. So, I'm telling you, guys, Dana White and Mr. Beast, they're really helping me out because the technology is great, but it really takes visionaries like these guys to help the world understand what we're capable of doing. I will maybe just say, because you asked me who would I like to see use this. I think international politicians. I'm not going to say who specifically, but I think this is the safest way to go anywhere and appear like you're physically there. And I don't know if you've been paying attention to politics, but it's pretty dangerous out there. So I think that is actually, I think that would be a really smart use of the technology. But guys like Joe Rogan, I think he would be terrific. I know like Tony Hinchcliffe and like the whole Kill Tony folks. I think broadcasters, I'd love for you to use it. But I think the ultimate goal, the reason why I fell in love with broadcasting in the first place, and this is probably going to tell my age a little bit more than I'd like it. There's a guy named Howard Stern who, in 1991, I was in high school and I was sitting in the parking lot. I was just about to go to high school and I was just about to turn the radio off. And then this maniac gets on the air. And a lot of people don't realize early Howard Stern was as exciting as any podcaster that is happening right now. I mean, he was challenging a company called the FCC, which was trying to shut him down. Podcast, you could say whatever you want on your podcast, but on the radio, you had to play by the rules. And this is a guy that didn't play by the rules. He would have little people on and strippers, and he would talk the way I thought about talking, but was always afraid to talk, and he would always get in trouble for it. And I remember being 3 or 4 hours late to school that day because I was fascinated by this guy. If you want to like listen to early, like 1987 or 1991 or even 1995 Howard Stern, the early days of Howard Stern, I think really paved the way for the podcast that we listen to these days. Long form interviews, say whatever the hell you want. I would love to work with Howard, but that'll never happen.
Hey, never say never, man. I'm sure you've pinched yourself a few times here over the last few years, so you never know. David, it's been a pleasure, man. I've taken up just over 20 minutes of your time here, and I mean, I've learned a ton, and it seems like you're doing some fantastic things. I know you said your inbox is full, but the final thing, I'll leave the floor to you to let people know how they can get a hold of you if they want to use Proto.
Yeah, at Proto Hologram on everything, PROTO Hologram, and we're on all the social medias. So find me there, and maybe one day we'll beam not just into your boardroom, but we'll beam into your living room. Coming soon. A hologram will be coming soon to a home near you.
Thanks a lot, David. All the best, man.
Thanks a lot for having me.